All right, great. Hi, everybody. My name is Jeane. I'm with the League of Extraordinary Scientists and Engineers. Welcome to Comic-Con! Hey. We're so happy to be here. The number one thing that we as a group really love about Comic-Con is the question and answers that you guys bring to our panel. So we did what all good scientists do, and we went through our Comic-Con panels and we looked for one of the most asked questions of all of us. And that would be, what do you consider to be, or most people would consider to be extraordinary, but in our field of science and engineering is pretty normal and not extraordinary? So we're going to go through all of our 8 panelists who are extraordinary scientists and engineers in their own field. They're going to answer that question for you. And our biggest hope is to inspire you to stay curious and keep on sciencing. So we're going to start today with, oh wait, maybe I should just introduce really quick. We have Angela Zoumplis, the extremophile explorer from Scripps Institution of Oceanography and the J. Craig Venter Institute. We have Ben Frable, who is the collection manager, a marine biologist, collection manager at Scripps Institution of Oceanography. Jasmine L. Sadler, who is the CEO of the STEAM Collaborative, who is also the dancing rocket scientist. We have Lisa Zeigler Allen, who is the Ph.D. Microbial Environmental Genomics. She runs her own lab at the J. Craig Venter Institute. We have Molly Maddie, who we lovingly call Dr. DNA from the Salk Institute. We also have Dr. Nicholas Golski, who is the Edge of the Universe explorer and cosmologist. He builds really big telescopes that can see really far away, like really far away. I'm super excited to hear from him as well. Dr. Sunny Fugate, the technical director of Cyber Warfare Naval Information Warfare Center. And Dr. Tom Darlington, the chief scientist of NanoComposix. So we're gonna get started and talk about what you might think is extraordinary, but is rather ordinary in these fields. So we're gonna start with you, Angela.
All right, cool. Yeah, thanks, Jeane. So as Jeane said, I study extremophiles. Extremophiles are organisms that are happiest living in extreme environments. So most people think it's pretty crazy to live in conditions where life approaches the near limits of life and most other life is really unhappy, but we find a lot of life in really extreme environments. So for my research, we go to the dry valleys of Antarctica. The dry valleys are the coldest, windiest, driest places on Earth. It's actually a lot like Mars. Temps can drop 3 times as low as your freezer at home. So really cold, really dry, pretty crazy place to live. And a lot of extremophiles call this place home. So I kind of compare them a little bit to Mr. Freeze from Batman. Have you guys heard of Mr. Freeze from Batman? Yeah. He was in the 1990s movies portrayed by Arnold Schwarzenegger. So Mr. Freeze, his backstory is, so he had this ice gun. He made this little freeze gun and he dropped it or some accident happened and he got all frozen, but then he survived. And then he went on to, survive and be all grumpy and be Batman's villain. But, in normal life, these extremophiles get frozen all the time and they don't complain about it. They get frozen, they survive, they live, they're happy. And some of them even live in ice. Some of them can even live in the ice. So what they do is when temperatures get low and ice starts forming, they spit out this goopy stuff that then binds to ice crystals and stops them from forming. So they create like a little bubble around themselves to live in the ice. Pretty cool stuff. Some of these organisms also have these antifreeze proteins in their blood. So ice can cause a lot of internal damage if it forms in your blood. So ice fish, other things have these antifreeze proteins that stop ice from growing in their blood to protect themselves. And we've already been able to harness a lot of these cool superpowers. So we use antifreeze proteins for organ donor transplants to protect organs, and they're also found in your ice cream. They make ice cream a lot less icy and a lot more delicious. So yeah, pretty cool stuff. That's what Are we doing superhero names?
Or superhero name or superhero power?
Okay. Something cold and witty. Iced tea, if that's not already taken. Iced tea.
Okay.
Or ice cube. Ice cube's fine.
Ask one really quick question. How do you know they're not grumpy? You're like,
How do I know? Oh, how do I know they're not grumpy, huh? Yeah, that's right. Well, they can't really talk yet, but you know, one day they'll grow into it.
Someday. Thank you so much. All right. So now we're going to go to Ben Frable, who is a marine biologist and collection manager at Scripps Institution of Oceanography.
Yeah, thanks, Jeane. So I manage what's called the fish collection here at Scripps. It's a big room full of preserved fish specimens that scientists all over the world use. And today I'm going to talk about something that's usually considered a superpower that a good number of fish species are able to do, and that's the ability to generate electricity. So you see this in superheroes like Storm from X-Men, Static, Raiden from Mortal Kombat, Shazam, those kinds of things. But there are actually over 700 species of fish that can produce their own electricity as well, and it's evolved 8 different times in fishes. Since electricity can travel a little better in water than on air, this kind of was conducive for fish evolving this ability. And they can use electricity to help them navigate, communicate, find, and stun prey. And so this is super duper helpful, especially when fishes are living in like really muddy or dark habitats like muddy rivers, lakes, estuaries. And fish that use electricity tend to be nocturnal. So they're not necessarily relying on their eyes, but they're using this kind of ability to produce and sense electricity as kind of a way to navigate. Actually, you can think about this kind of like how Daredevil works. So there are 2 types of electric fish, what are called weakly electric fish. And these are fish that produce a weak electric field, kind of around the equivalent of 1 volt, kind of 2/3 of a AA battery. And they're mostly just using this to create an electric field around themselves so they can sense changes in that field, maybe when a prey is nearby, maybe when they're swimming in the dark and they don't want to run into a rock. And they can also use this electric field to communicate. They can set out a specific pattern in the electric field that other fish can sense. And this allows them to find, say, the same species as themselves or the male and female of their species. So some weakly electric fish are these guys. This is called a knifefish, and this is called an elephant nosefish. And it has a special organ called the Schnauzen organ that allows it, this is all electroreceptors, so it allows it to sense electrical fields. Now, the other main group of electric fish are strongly electric fish. These are ones you may be more familiar with. Probably the most famous of the strongly electric fish is the electric knifefish or electric eel. It's not actually an eel. This is related to the knifefish that I just showed, but these ones have 3 special organs that allow them to generate up to 600 volts of electricity to incapacitate prey. It could actually do a lot to incapacitate humans as well. Now, a couple other strongly electric fish are this other cute little fish. This is called an electric catfish. These live in North Africa and the Amazon, and they can produce and the Nile, and they can produce up to 350 volts of electricity and also pack quite the punch. These were actually revered sometimes in ancient Egypt, and they're actually mummies of these that have been found in some tombs. Now, in the ocean, there are only a few fish that are strongly electric. The first is the torpedo ray or electric ray. It has 2 electric organs right here kind of on the back of its head that it is able to use to kind of wrap these fins around prey, shock them, and incapacitate them. And these were actually used by ancient Romans as a treatment for chronic pain. People would put their foot in a bucket with one of these and let it shock them. And then the last, one of my personal favorites, is this fish here called the stargazer. Very ugly face. And these guys burrow in the sand, and they have 2 electric organs that are actually modified from eye muscles right here on the back of their head. You can see them. And they are able to shoot a little jolt of electricity kind of towards their mouth to incapacitate prey as they're eating it. So you can think about these as being able to shoot electricity out of their eyes. Yeah, so those are electric fish, something that's pretty extraordinary, but it's pretty normal for over 700 different species.
That's amazing.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What does incapacitate mean?
It means that they're able to kind of knock them out or make it so their muscles can't move with the electricity.
Crazy. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Fish or fishes. I love it, Ben. Thank you so much. All right.
Oh, wait, and my superhero name would be Fishman.
Yeah. Not, oh, yeah. You're like, I'm not going to be Aquaman. All right. I love that.
Knock off it, Aquaman.
Now we have Jasmine Sadler, who is the dancing rocket scientist. She is the CEO and founder of the STEAM Collaborative, and she is also an amazing online tutor of mathematical rocket science. So if you're looking for that, Jasmine, take it away.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Jasmine Sadler. I'm actually at my parents' house visiting them. And so that's the awesome thing about technology, where we can do it anywhere. And you guys are in for a treat because I brought some hashtag TBT Throwback Thursday items from around my parents' house, which is kind of strange. But I guess, let's go through a little journey. My parents keep all of my stuff. So this is a little journey from 1991, 1992, where I first started figure skating. And so I learned how to figure skate. I was about 5 or 6 years old, which was pretty cool. So I'm still pretty good at ice skating, and people don't really know that. I'm from Michigan. Another thing that happened in 5th grade, I learned how to play the flute. And so here's my flute that my dad found for me recently. And so I'm going to take it back home with me. But a really cool thing, because I'm a super artsy person too, is that I painted all of the keys of my flute with glue, liquid glue, and glitter, because that's cool, apparently. So every key has glitter and glue on it. And then the outside of the case is probably the best part, is because I did this to my case, because why would you want a normal looking black flute case? So that's part of my artism. And then my parents put me in everything. So here's when I was champion for Detroit Police Athletic League. And so played softball, which a lot of people don't really know. And then my favorite thing that I grew up doing was dancing my whole life. And so I was actually a competitive dancer, and we won a lot of trophies, traveled a whole lot, competing. So that was kind of my artsy, sports start. But then the main thing for me that stuck was dance. So I've been dancing my whole life. I love ballet. But then my parents also put me in a lot of engineering camps or programs. We learned how to create websites, things like that. And both of my parents are computer specialists, so they know a lot about computers. And then my brother studied computer engineering, so he loves building computers. I didn't really love computers that much, but my brother really encouraged me to do engineering because I love math. So I love math and I love dance a whole lot. And so it's like, well, I kind of want to major in dance when I go to college, but I know being an engineer can make me a lot of money. So it was really around the time in high school where there's a space shuttle disaster, Space Shuttle Columbia disaster happened. And I'm like, people shouldn't be dying doing a really, really cool job out of this world. So that's why I decided to go and study in aerospace engineering. So really good in math, but then I still danced on a hip hop team while I was in college. So I had the left side of my brain with the technical stuff and engineering, and then the right side of my brain dancing and doing artsy stuff like this the whole time I was in college. And so from there, I studied as an engineer where we turn air into energy. So that's the type of aerospace that I did, where we would either do aircraft engines. So it's the round things on the side of an airplane that gives it its power, it gives it its electricity, it gives you the air so you can breathe when you're really high up. And then I've also done wind turbines, which give you energy and electricity, and then oil and gas turbines, so how you get gas to your stove if you have a gas stove or things like that. And so that's the type of engineering that I did. And all of that's very similar because it turns air, electricity, and energy. And so that's how a lot of us have our lights on today, is because of aerospace engineers, when we kind of learn how to store that air and make it into power. So that's my background in engineering, but now I have my own company, the STEAM Collaborative, where I get to do fun artsy things like this, or my makeup, or my hair, or this scarf. And so I get to do a lot of things that a lot of girls like to do, which is really pretty things, get to do my nails, all types of fun things. But then I still get to be an engineer, which is really just a problem solver. So the main problem that I try to solve are getting more girls and more African-American students to pursue STEM. So STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and math. And so I try to do it from an artistic perspective because everything about me is still very artsy. So that happens with a lot of people. And so people think that it's extraordinary or super normal for me to be a dancing rocket scientist, but it's really normal for a lot of people to be creative and to still be really, really good in math, science, engineering, technology. If you're really good in Zoom or helping your mom or dad work in Zoom, then that's technology. And so if you found some problems with Zoom already that you would love to be improved, then that kind of makes you an engineer and a problem solver. So those are some things now that you all can really start doing and start fixing some of the problems that you're coming across when you're using technology. So that's a little bit about me. I put my information in there. It's at the STEAM Collab. You can find me on social media anywhere. So
well, what's your superhero name?
My superhero name. I was gonna get there and then I forgot. I was gonna start with it, but then all of this flute stuff got really cool. So I think it's still gonna be the STEAM Maven.
Yes.
So a Maven is a person who brings people together through sharing information. And so that's what I do with the STEAM Collaborative, is have people collaborate and come together. So I do it with STEAM, so the STEAM Maven.
Nice, beautiful. All right, now we have Dr. Lisa Zeigler Allen, who's a PhD, and she has her own lab at the J. Craig Venter Institute, does microbial and environmental genomics.
Hi, everyone. So as Jeane said, I study environmental genomics, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of what I study, which are the smallest biological entities on the planet, which are viruses. And so we've all heard a lot about viruses recently, one in particular, but the viruses that I study are not those that infect humans. In fact, they're the most numerous on the planet, and they infect single-celled organisms like bacteria or some of the other single-celled organisms like phytoplankton in the ocean. And so viruses are very interesting. They're also and part of that is that they're the most numerous biological entity on the planet. There's estimated to be 10 to the 31 viruses on Earth. And if we put those end to end, they're thought to extend over 100 million light years away into space. And so with being this numerous, they also account for a large percentage of the biomass on Earth. And so when we talk about biomass, or the amount of material of something, say in this case a population, we talk about carbon. And so there's 550 gigatons of carbon on Earth, and 0.2 gigatons of carbon is within viral populations. Sounds pretty small, right? Except for that 0.2 gigatons in viruses is actually more carbon that's made up in the entire human population. So viruses actually account for more carbon than we do. Another interesting fact about the amount of carbon on Earth and how viruses play a role in it is that we know that through their infection, so viruses do not exist outside of a host. So they form this parasitic relationship basically with their host. They have to have a host in order to produce offspring. And so within these infections that occur, they turn over 150 gigatons of the carbon on Earth per year. It's a huge amount of carbon that they're turning over. And so in this turnover that happens in every kind of ecosystem on Earth, this turnover is incredibly important because a lot of times what that leads to are stable, healthy ecosystems. And so I just want that to be one take-home message, is that viruses are not all bad. I promise. There are good attributes to them, and they are a necessary entity on our Earth. And so this, another aspect of viruses that I love, that I think really leads to their superpower, is their ability to adapt. Okay, they can adapt much faster than any other organism on Earth. And so they do this in part due to this ability to mutate. They can mutate really, really fast, and they can also produce vast quantities of these mutants or mutant populations that they produce. And these mutations will often give them this adaptive ability, or this adaptation to, say, the environmental pressures that are around them, which are usually within the host cell. And so the host during this infection is obviously trying to get rid of the virus. So they produce things like antiviral compounds, or they'll change their cell in some way to evade the virus. And so the virus has to adapt super fast in order to still infect so that it can still produce offspring, because it wants to do that just like every other biological entity on Earth. And so this, I think, is just an incredible superpower of viruses, in that they can just adapt so quickly. And one fun aspect about this is that we think about evolution, like Darwinian evolution. This can take many, many years. And oftentimes, as scientists, we can measure bits and pieces of it, and we can predict what might happen in evolution. But with viruses, we can actually see evolution in real time sometimes. If we set up certain experiments within the laboratory, you can see this adaptation occurring on days to weeks, as opposed to the many years that it takes in cellular organisms. So that is, I think, hopefully some fun things about viruses, and hopefully some positives as well to remember when you think about them. And oh, and my superhero name is Pathogen.
Oh, Jen, Pathogen. That's so legit, and that was super mind-blowing. All of that is super mind-blowing. I can't wait to go back to this and hear more. Hey, Ellis, how are you, babe?
Hey, I'm building the Lego space station.
So Ellis made me the International Space Station for today, because I was going to maybe share some of the work that we do on samples from the space station.
That's amazing. All right, now we're going to go to Dr. Molly Maddie. Dr. Molly Maddie, we call her lovingly Dr. DNA. She goes in a lot of classrooms and teaches specifically about DNA, and we love that. She's of the Salk Institute for Biological Studies. Dr. Molly.
Hey, everybody. How's it going? So I'm a postdoctoral researcher at the Salk Institute, where I use microscopic worms to study neuroscience and behavior. So I spend most of my day doing this. It's not super interesting to look at, but what we think about is actually really cool. And I'm going to talk about something that my lab works on that sounds like it's right out of one of my favorite works of science fiction, Dune. So you might be familiar with Dune. He who controls the spice controls the universe. And they have these big worms that are really scary that they control with these voice modifiers called the weirding module. And these voice modifiers project sound that allows you to control these worms. That's what we do in my lab. So there are some really smart scientists who are controlling genes, cells, and maybe even whole organisms with sound. So this new field is called sonogenetics, or sound genetics, which again sounds like something out of a science fiction movie, but I'm here to tell you it's super normal. So sound, we know, is just vibrations, right? And so there are living things that don't have ears, they don't have neurons, and they still respond to vibration or touch. I have one here, a Venus flytrap. When a fly lands onto it, it senses its little legs there, and it closes up immediately and starts gobbling it up. There's other plants, like the touch-me-not plant, also called the mimosa, which closes its leaves when it's touched. Even earthworms do this. They can sense vibrations that either mean a thunderstorm's coming or a mole is digging around them, so it makes them come up from the earth. So what scientists do is they take all these organisms, take their DNA, and search for little pieces, like this, that actually make proteins that activate in response to vibrations. So something that maybe an earthworm, a Venus flytrap, and a mimosa have that a daisy doesn't. So we can take these little bits of genes and put them into mouse or human cells in a lab and make them respond to sound or vibrations. And so the sound that we use in my lab is actually ultrasound, around 2 megahertz. And this is similar to the frequency used for medical imaging. And it's at a really high frequency, so we can't hear it ourselves. But when we put in these little pieces of DNA into the cells in a dish, they do respond, just like the Venus flytrap would. So scientists in my lab and others have been working on sonogenetics for a few years, but a similar technology already exists, called optogenetics. Opto means light, so scientists use light to activate special genes that they discovered from algae, which is super cool. So why would scientists want to activate genes or cells or control worms with sound? It's not because we're going to go mining spice on a planet yet, But we can actually use these genetic tools in the lab to understand how biology works, or someday we could even use sonogenetics to non-invasively, so this means without surgery, reactivate parts of people's muscles or brains that are injured. So it might sound supernatural, sci-fi, fantasy, but I hope that someday it will be this real-life, super normal cure for human injuries. So maybe someday we won't need to go and get fish to shock us and cure our chronic pain. We can use something like sonogenetics.
Awesome. That sounds super Dune-ish. Dune.
It is. Yes, I love Dune.
Your superhero name.
So my superhero name is Dr. DNA because I just think about these little C's and T's and A's and G's all day, every day.
I love it. All right, now we're going to go to Dr. Nicholas Golski, who is an edge of the universe explorer cosmologist. He builds huge telescopes at the Sims Observatory and is a cosmologist at the UCSD Cosmology. Nicholas.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me on. And I'll just start out with the superhero vibe here because, you know, usually I go to Comic-Con as Thor, but with this COVID shutdown and so forth, I haven't been hitting the gym so much, and I've got the more of the post-COVID Thor or PCT physique going on that I'm working here. In my field of physics and astronomy, I would say it's a very fun field because there are many things that are extraordinary that happen day to day. So we can talk about how we bend space and time to move whole planets around. But that's kind of happening all the time. In fact, it's happening right now. We also do a lot of cooling technology. So you were talking about Mr. Freeze earlier. Well, we have diabolical experiments that go down to negative 460 degrees Fahrenheit. Except that's kind of normal. I did that twice last week, so it's still cool though. We also do talking about Angela going to Antarctica. We go to Antarctica to build experiments to understand the structure of the universe. That never gets old, by the way, but it's also something we've been doing for quite a while. So, well, there are many cool things like that. What I want to focus on is something even more basic today, and that's something all those pale in comparison to, which is the incredible fact that all astronomers, every single day they work, they time travel. That's right. And that's because of a key fact of our universe, that light travels at a set speed. That speed's around 300,000 kilometers per second, or about 670 million miles per hour. But what that means is that the farther away something is, the longer it takes for light to get to our eyes or our telescopes. Now, for instance, we could you look outside right now and you see the sunlight. Well, that took 8 minutes to get here. So it's we're seeing the sun as it was about 8 minutes ago. If you look at stars at night, same thing. You're seeing those stars as they were tens to hundreds of years ago. And even a small telescope like the one behind me, or Epoxy, even a small telescope like that, you can travel millions of years back in time by observing nearby galaxies. It's just that easy to time travel. Now, we can keep doing that. You can just keep going farther and farther back. And in fact, with the telescopes that I work with, these really sensitive telescopes, we can look back in time 13.8 billion years to nearly the beginning of the universe. That's right. The Big Bang, which these days most people accept as the common cosmology or a TV show, that was only discovered about 60 years ago. And that's because we kept looking back and looking farther away, and ultimately we ended up seeing the glowing ember that was the beginning of our universe stretched across the sky. And that's more commonly known or referred to as the cosmic microwave background, the CMB. So just think of that. Every day on Earth, a set of incredibly sensitive telescopes look back in time as far back as we can look and scan the light from just after the Big Bang to understand how our universe formed. And that's what I get to do every day. It's pretty cool. So just to think about the time travel capabilities of astronomers and how powerful that has been to understand how our universe formed, how it evolved, and how it's been able to produce all these wonderful things we see, like galaxies, stars, planets, us. and all the wonderful laws of physics that we know and love. So kind of finish out here to encourage everyone that can find a telescope like this guy if they get the chance, and do a little nighttime time traveling of your own. Thank you.
That is amazing. Thank you so much. Oh, your superhero name, other than Chunky Thor, I think.
What's wrong with Chunky Thor? I thought that was great. Oh.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much. All right. So now we are going to go to Dr. Sunny Fugate, who's the Technical Director for Cyber Warfare and Naval Information and Warfare Center. Hey, Sunny.
Hi, how are you doing?
Great.
So I'm Sunny Fugate, and I am the Senior Scientific and Technical Manager for Cyber Warfare at the Naval Information Warfare Center. And I get to bridge disciplines. I get to lead a team of engineers and mathematicians and cognitive scientists and computer scientists in the study of how to create novel defenses for our computer networks. And this means that we get to apply the tools of computer science, and we get to study how we can apply artificial intelligence algorithms and machine learning algorithms to learning, say, how an attacker behaves and what kinds of defenses might work. But we also get to study the human side of things. So we get to study the human-machine hybrid. So this is sort of how we all live today as these human-machine hybrids. I live with my phone in my pocket, and it's set, in some sense, is a part of my brain or my mind that's been externalized. So we get to study how humans interact with machines, or how we use machines to interact. And then most importantly is, well, let's talk about this. What is normal for sort of me, and for my field, but sort of extraordinary? And I think one thing that pops out to me is that normally you think of a computer as something you can point at, like there's a box. Maybe it's a phone, maybe it's a computer. That's just a beige box or a black box that does your things. Maybe it's your PlayStation. But since the birth of computing hasn't, at least for computer scientists, been a box. Sometimes it's a warehouse. It's an entire building full of computing devices. And today that scale is even larger. Now we have computers that span the planet. And so that's totally normal. We use these kinds of machines all the time, day in and day out, to do our work as scientists. And many of the engineering disciplines and other disciplines that might be generating large scale tools that we might use just for something as seemingly simple as watching a movie, these large scale computing systems span the globe, which is pretty amazing. And I think really extraordinary is that the device that you now hold in your hand at one point in time was the size of a warehouse. And the devices that we now use that span the globe to do the most advanced research we know how to do, both in our engineering disciplines and in our physics disciplines and others, these devices eventually will likely also fit in your hand. And at some point in time in the future, you will have today's supercomputer at your bidding to do the things that you want to do with it. So we use this in my lab to perform simulation. So we might create a simulation of an entire large-scale network and the kinds of defenses that we might employ on that network. Then we might also create a simulation of a particular kind of attacker. And we might ask the question of, are defenses sufficient? What if the attacker is a learning attacker? Can we put a machine learning algorithm behind that attacker and have them learn the defense over time, over many hundreds of thousands or millions of trials, and see if that defense is still robust? So if I were to, let's see, have a superhero name, the thing that drew me to science to begin with was this cool idea of guessing and checking. And that sounds really mundane. But guessing is really sort of the art of prediction. It's not necessarily making the correct prediction, it's making a useful prediction. And that doesn't mean that it's right or that it will prove that it's right, but it means that it leads to new questions. And if you look back at the history of science, it isn't this sequence of correct predictions one after another, and then they sort of looked at and provided some experimental evidence. It's a bunch of really bad predictions that led to entire new fields of study where we started exploring all of these cool ideas. So I think my superhero name would be something like maybe insight, because if I could make useful predictions from now going forward, that would be awesome. So really guessing and checking, jumping to conclusions at first, maybe using my gut instinct, generating some useful hypotheses, but then asking these questions of, am I right? And how would I know that I'm right? How do I know I'm not suffering by confirmation bias, which is one of the things we study in our cyber defenses? And then how would I know that I'm wrong? Well, how I had to test also disconfirming evidence in the way that I explore the world.
That is amazing. Insight. I love that. I think that before we started the internet defender, I like insight way better. That's super awesome. Thanks, Dr. Sunny. All right. Now we're going to go to Dr. Tom Darlington, who is the chief scientist at NanoComposix.
All right. Thank you, Jeane. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, I'm chief scientist, VP operations at NanoComposix. We're a company that actually came out of a garage about 15 years ago, and now we're a thriving biotech company of about 65 people. Superhero name, first off, if I could have had your insight in building and growing a nanotechnology company, Sunny, that would be amazing. We definitely have made a lot of guesses along the way, some of which are right, some of which not so much, but we've made it this far. So that's actually been really exciting. So my super name to lead with that is the golden rainbow. And so the reason is because at NanoComposix, we can turn gold and silver into all different colors of the rainbow. So we take gold or we take silver, or sometimes the two of them together, and we can make solutions that are all different colors of the rainbow. So how do we do that? Well, I'll tell you about that in a second, but it's sort of like, you know, the way I liken it is I'm kind of like the Wonder Twins, or half of the Wonder Twins. So they can make water and animals. We can make basically any color of the rainbow. So this is definitely a favorite of my youngest daughter. This morning she was looking for her rainbow unicorn horn, which hers is not made of gold and silver. I'm sorry, sweetie. I wish I could have made it from that. But I'm positive that real rainbow unicorn horns are made of plasmonic gold and silver. So normally we think of gold and silver as metals with the colors of, you know, gold and silver. And that's pretty normal, but you know, when we build them at the nanoscale, they start to take on some pretty extraordinary properties. One of them is gold and silver are really dense, right? And so normally in nature, you would find gold, at least panning for gold in the mountains up around San Francisco, maybe in 49, about a century and a half ago. But we actually have them and they're in solution. So as opposed to falling to the bottom of the stream, we've got colloidal solutions of gold or silver, for example. And the second property, and this is really what's key to what we do, is called plasmonics. And so it's a really hard concept to understand, and there is a whole bunch of math and electronics behind it, but a semi-simple way to explain it is that all the electrons in the particle kind of oscillate together, and they can have a collective oscillation that couples with light. And so it's a property that's unique to gold and silver and a few other metals that are a little less easy to work with. But those energies of those plasmons can be tuned to different wavelengths or different colors of light. And so how do we do that? We change the size and shape of the particles. And so we can make spheres, we can make plates, we can make cubes, we can make rods, we can make wires, or we can make my favorite, which are Technicolor silver nanoribbons. And those look basically like kind of rainbow confetti, and they're really this amazing thing that we've made. We haven't done much with it, but they're just really amazing, but I can't figure out how to apply those to anything other than maybe, I don't know, at a disco. But so by making different sizes, shape, and gold, we can make any color of the rainbow. So these are gold particles, these are spheres, these are silver particles, also spheres, different sizes, shapes, colors, and then also you change the size and you've got different silvers as well. So these are silver discs or silver plates. So all different colors. Some of these go out into the infrared. And that's really cool because you can do things like tune infrared lasers to work with these particles and use them for therapeutic things like photothermal therapy. So how do we make these particles? We use chemistry. And so, you know, that to me is kind of a superpower. We use different reductants, polymers, templates, etchants, different seed particles. We can get whatever size and shape we want. It's a bit of empirical science and a bit of black magic, because honestly, it's hard to predict some of the things that happen, but I feel like an alchemist some of the time. So then the other thing that I want to talk about, sort of our extraordinary superpowers, is that we can see with electrons. So we use electron microscopes, TEMs and SEMs all the time. So I use those with my eyes, or I translate with the microscopes to my eyes. So they give us electron vision. And not only can we see at the near atomic scale, we can also see exactly what elements these different particles are made of. So those are just some pretty amazing tools that we have at our hand that I think of, all the time, but it's actually pretty surprising that we can actually do that. The last tool that we have that's kind of extraordinary is called a spectrophotometer. So that lets us measure or decode the light in any sample. So a human eye, we can see 3 colors, red, green, and blue. And some people can see a 4th color, kind of, but that's not all that common. But in using a spectrophotometer, we can see all the different nanometer wavelength resolution. So visible light goes from 400 to 700 nanometers, and we can see at 1 nanometer resolution. So we got 300 different channels. So I can see at a 300 time better resolution than I can with my eye. So that's pretty cool. And then also we can look at the high energy UV, or we can look all the way out into the infrared and different parts of the spectrum. I mean, I think that definitely has applications in some of the other sciences here, like the cosmology especially. So why does this matter? Who cares? It's great to make rainbows. That's super fun, but actually how do you build a business and do things that impact people's lives? So photothermal therapy, that's one of my favorites. That's where you can target laser particles or tune particles to different wavelengths of lasers, use them to treat things like cancer or acne by targeting tumors or sebaceous glands. You can use them as sensors. So these plasmons are really, really sensitive to the environment around them. And so they can be very, very ultra-sensitive detectors. You can see a physical change, an antibody binding to a particle, and you can actually see a single event happen, which is, I think, pretty amazing. Or if you put the 2 particles together, they change color. So they're far apart, they're one color, you put them together, they're a different color. The other thing is ultra bright detectors. So we use these gold nanoshells, which are about 20 times more sensitive than standard gold products in things called a lateral flow assay, which is really just similar to a pregnancy test. And so those can be made to detect any metabolite or like a stress hormone, or you can look to detect a microbial infection, either the microbe itself, or if your body has had that. So those are some of the ideas. So again, gold and silver we can use to make any color of the rainbow, and that gives us a whole bunch of different tools to do things. So
I love that. Well, we're getting right to it. We're like right up to the minute here, guys, everybody. So we're really glad that you guys came to our panel. Thank you, Golden Rainbow, everybody for contributing to this. I hope that all of you guys had a really good time with this. Please leave your comments, and we'll come back and look at it and reply to them. So in the end, everybody, stay curious.
Stay curious and keep on
sciencing.
Keep on sciencing.
Woo!
Woohoo!